The complexity of assigning responsibility within the justice system is analogous to a high-wire balancing act, rooted in a tug-of-war between determinism and free will. The legal system assumes that individuals possess free will and are capable of making independent decisions, forming the foundational assumption on which consequences for actions are determined. Simply put, if someone commits an action deemed illegal, they are apprehended, tried, and if found guilty, they are punished in line with the legal standards for such a crime. However, the underpinnings of our decision-making processes are more complex than they initially appear. Our actions are influenced not only by momentary desires, but by our genetic predispositions, environmental factors, and their interactions, causing biological and environmental determinism. This raises an intriguing question: to what extent should we consider these deterministic influences when assigning legal responsibility? If an individual's genetic predisposition or environmental circumstances drive them towards committing a crime, should we consider the determinism that shaped their decision? But we can't completely absolve individuals of responsibility based on deterministic influences, as in people from similar genetic or environmental backgrounds have numerously made different choices. This showcases the element of free will in action, guiding our decisions and actions despite the determinism inherent in our biology and environment. Our brains process information from our surroundings and our inner thoughts to direct our actions. In this context, free will can be seen as a manifestation of this complex neural processing. While determinism sets the stage and provides the script, our brains, ourselves, are the directors, making decisions based on the available information. Therefore, we can't deny the role of deterministic factors in our decision-making, but neither can we ignore the role of free will. In short, our choices are not predetermined and they are not free. This perspective poses challenges for the legal system, which largely operates on a binary understanding of responsibility. In most jurisdictions, an individual is either found guilty or not guilty, and there's little room for nuanced considerations of the deterministic influences on their actions. We may find some answers in the principle of mens rea, or guilty mind, where an individual's mental state at the time of the crime plays a central role in determining their legal responsibility. This idea is strongly tied to the concept of free will, that we are conscious agents, making deliberate choices based on our thoughts and intentions. Similarly, mitigating factors or extenuating circumstances, background, mental health, and other influences that significantly impact decision-making abilities are forms of deterministic influences. Such considerations can sometimes result in reduced sentences, portraying an intersection of free will and determinism in the law. But where do we draw the line? If we consider deterministic influence, won't every action be justified in some way? On the contrary, if we rely solely on the concept of free will, won't we overlook the critical influences that drive people to commit certain acts? The legal implications of the free will versus determinism debate bring us face to face with challenging questions, which our current legal systems are not fully equipped to address. This necessitates a thoughtful reconsideration of our legal principles, keeping in mind the key points of the free will versus determinism debate. What if such a person commits a crime under this influence? Can they be held accountable for their actions? While this may seem like a plot from a sci-fi movie, it's not entirely implausible, given the rapid advances in neuroscience. Consider the case of Charles Whitman, a man who murdered his wife and mother, and then killed 14 more people in a shooting spree at the University of Texas in 1966. Upon autopsy, it was discovered that Whitman had a brain tumor pressing against his amygdala, the part of the brain associated with emotions, especially fear and aggression. Could it be possible that Whitman was not exercising free will when he went on his rampage, but was instead being compelled by a brain tumor? Consider the case of Phineas Gage, a well-liked and responsible railroad worker who suffered severe damage to his frontal cortex in 1948. After the accident, he became erratic, irritable, and irresponsible. His behavior was clearly changed by the accident. So, to what extent was Gage responsible for his post-accident behavior? Such cases force us to reconsider the concept of responsibility in light of our growing understanding of the brain. If certain actions are driven by deterministic influences beyond our control, then assigning responsibility becomes complex. And the law, as a system assigning responsibility, needs to reconsider its approach. These are complex, multifaceted issues that do not lend themselves to simple answers. However, recognizing these challenges can help us better understand the complexity of human behavior and the importance of considering both free will and determinism in our attempts to make sense of it. We need to rethink the concept of responsibility, not just in the courtroom but in our daily lives as well. It is important for us as a society to understand and empathize with the various influences that shape an individual's actions, without absolving them of responsibility for their actions. The philosophy of law, or jurisprudence, provides an excellent platform for understanding how responsibility is assigned and what role free will plays in this process. Classical jurisprudence considers an individual responsible for their actions except for in two cases. Either the individual was forced to act against their will, or if the individual was not in a mental state to understand the nature and consequences of their actions. However, a person's actions could be influenced by deterministic forces, such as their genetic makeup, upbringing, or even an undiagnosed brain condition, as in the case of Charles Whitman. In this regard, the legal system may need to update its understanding of responsibility to account for deterministic influences. For instance, should a person with a proven predisposition towards violence be held to the same standard of responsibility as a person without such a predisposition? The answer to this question is not straightforward and calls for a careful reconsideration of the concept of responsibility. The assignment of responsibility in the legal system must find a balance between acknowledging free will and understanding deterministic influences on human behavior. As our knowledge of the human brain and its influence on our actions grows, we may need to develop a more elaborate understanding of responsibility that can account for both free will and determinism.